The HTC One A9 was the first major phone to be released this year. It had a head start above everything else, but fortunately it kind of fizzled out quickly from memory due to the incredible amount of competition that came not only afterwards, but even more recently. Now HTC is redefining the term flagship with its next upcoming smartphone for the holiday season, and it's definitely sporting some un-HTC-like qualities, but hopefully it's going to put them back to the positive. Hey guys, John V from PhoneArena here. You're watching our video review of the HTC One A9. What's most astounding about the A9 has to be its premium design and its solid build quality. Those are two characteristics that are typical with HTC's products, and you see that here with the A9. Now most people have mistaken this phone for an iPhone 6 or 6S. It's actually the best iPhone clone to date, bettering the Lenovo Pad Plus we checked out not too long ago. Now, even though the design isn't original per se, HTC begs to differ because they said they did it first with an all-metal phone with some plastic elements with the HTC Legend from a few years back. Despite that, what we have here is a dual brush and bead blasted finish with its metal chassis. It contrasts nice with the more polished sidewalls it has. And they aim for symmetry, and they managed to do that for the most part because the camera, the HTC logo, the earpiece, the fingerprint sensor, home button are all directly in the middle. However though, the micro USB port is a little bit offset. Now, it has a good size, making it easy to handle with one hand, and it's not as cumbersome as some of the larger phones out there, but it actually has a poor screen-to-body ratio of 66%. You could tell that there's a lot of bezel on the top and bottom of the phone. Now with that, you could also tell that it no longer has those dual front-firing speakers that we're normally accustomed to seeing. Instead, it only has a single speaker on the bottom edge. Now there's no compromise with its audio quality because it still delivers a pretty potent 72.3 decibels of power. They've also managed to tack on a fingerprint sensor below the display. It's incorporated to the home button, and it's recessed, and it does a pretty good job. It's responsive, and of course it means that it enables the phone for Android Pay. The other important thing we have to point out is that it features a new camera sensor that delivers better than average results, and it seems as though HTC finally has the perfect recipe when it comes to still image capture, because the M9 and the other handsets before it were kind of disappointing in that regard. It features a new 13 megapixel camera sensor with an f2.0 aperture lens. You have a sapphire crystal lens protecting it, backside illuminate sensor, a two-tone LED flash, and yes, optical image stabilization is back with this handset. We haven't seen it since the M7. However though, it tops out only a 1080p video capture, so that's kind of disappointing there. On the front, you have a 4.1 megapixel ultra pixel camera, and when it comes to the shooting experience, it's the same as other recent HTC devices. Same exact interface, but it has support for shooting raw photos, and you also have the useful Pro mode, which allows us to adjust many of the parameters, including shutter speed, though we wish that the shutter speed were longer than 2 seconds. Now, as far as the overall quality, like we said, it's significantly improved, but we wouldn't say it's as class-leading as we'd like. You get better looking details, warmer color tones when there's ample lighting. The HDR mode works pretty well too because it increases the exposure and color saturation appropriately without being too artificial with its production. The LED flash though tends to be a little bit unbalanced with its lighting, and it produces even warmer colors. Under lower lighting conditions, it's sufficient. It tends to be a little bit dimmer, so it doesn't get as much details in the shots, but at least there isn't that much noise. Unfortunately though, the 1080p video recording quality is just a wash. It's just too jumpy with its focus, you get poor looking details, and it's pretty noisy under lower lighting conditions. Besides the two new Nexus phones, the HTC One A9 is going to be one of the first new devices to actually launch with Android 6.0 Marshmallow. So it has the latest and greatest from Google. So that means you can get all the new features, including Now on Tap, which we've seen already on the Nexus devices. It's pretty good in what it does, and what we have here is Sense 7. It's the same experience that you'll find in the M9. Nothing has really changed with it. It still has a nice modern look. It's not overpowering with its presentation or functionality. So you get the same level of personalization with all the downloadable themes, so you could actually make it look how you want it to. It's a straightforward experience, which is good to capture a wide degree of users, but it doesn't have the same level of multitasking depth that you get in other custom experiences like TouchWiz from Samsung or even LG's interpretation. Another major change with the A9 is the fact that it's using AMOLED panel. For years now, HTC opted to go with Super LCD technology, but for this flagship, it's AMOLED, specifically a 5-inch 1080p AMOLED panel. Now, when you hear the word flagship, you're thinking nowadays probably at least Quad HD resolution, but HTC thinks that 1080p is still flagship caliber-like. Now, it still produces some good details. We're not complaining about that because from normal distance, it's still sharp and good looking. On top of that, it has some pretty good qualities for AMOLED panel. Now, there are two different color profile modes. You have AMOLED mode and also an sRGB profile. When you have an AMOLED mode, it has all the typical qualities, those oversaturated colors, unrealistic tones, of course. But if you put it into the sRGB mode, it actually produces some spot-on colors. You get some true-to-life realistic tones, pretty accurate, and also has some other favorable qualities like its 6800 color temperature and its 2.1 gamma value. The only area of opportunity here relates to its luminance. It tops out only at 356 nits, which is kind of weak. So when you look at it outdoors with the sun present, it tends to wash out. Now, while we really like the fact that it has a pretty slim profile, they only have a 2150 milliamp hour battery cell inside, and that's just a low capacity today. And with that, it doesn't surprise us that it results in an average-like performance. Now, we're able to get at least 1 day use out of it, but for power users, after working 8 hours, you're probably going to need some charge to get it through the rest of the day. And it's further clarified in our battery benchmark test. It tops out at 6 hours and 3 minutes, again putting it into the average category. We used a 1.5 amp charger to charge the A9, and it took only 110 minutes, which is pretty fast, but with Quick Charge 3.0 down the road, you could expect a faster charge time then. When you hear the term flagship, normally you'd think a phone would be outfitted with the best processor out there, but instead, the HTC One A9 utilizes the newest processor from Qualcomm's camp. Technically, it's not as formidable, but the octa-core Snapdragon 617 chip with 2GB of RAM and the Adreno 405 GPU does suffice when it comes to handling basic tasks. So opening up applications, navigating through the UI, it's all more than responsive, but most people wouldn't consider this chipset to be flagship-esque. Now, while the performance is decent for those things, it's rather underwhelming when it comes with its graphics processing. It's just extremely choppy, and it's nowhere close to achieving the same fluid frame rates that we saw with the M9. For conversations, the A9 delivers acceptable call quality with its performance. You get good volume through the earpiece. The speakerphone, however, is a little bit underpowered for some reason. There's just a slight hint of crackle with its quality. On the other end, however, there's no issues at all. They're exposed to some really crisp and clear tones. Here in the US, the HTC One A9 is going to attract a lot of people for its $400 starting cost. Now, that's through HTC directly, and you're going to be getting an unlocked model. So that's going to definitely attract a wider degree of consumers. But however, they state that it is a promotional price. So who knows if it's going to stay the same down the road or if it's going to be less or more. But at starting, it's pretty good. Now, it clearly looks and feels like a device priced over $600, and that's what makes it so appealing. And of course, it has some of the usual HTC design qualities intact. The best of all, HTC finally makes ample ground with its camera performance, and for once, we could say that it does pretty good when it comes to still image performance, though there is still an opportunity when it comes to shooting video. You get good value, but this year alone, we've seen some pretty good alternatives as well that make for compelling arguments. It's actually going to be competing in the same price point as, say, the Nexus 5X and even the Moto X Pure Edition. Now, those two phones have their respective great qualities, but for the people wanting the A9, it's basically going to come down to its size and build quality.